Welcome to a special episode of the SENDcast. My name is Dale Pickles, Managing Director of B Squared and the host of the SENDcast, the podcast for special educational needs and disability. Each week on the podcast, we talk about a different topic within the world of special educational needs to improve our knowledge, to provide support to professionals working in schools, and to empower parents. Now, this special episode is a series of special episodes to celebrate the award winners from the 2024 Nason Awards. And in this episode, my guests are Chapman Shum and his mentor, Professor Adam Ockelford. Chapman was the winner of the Young Advocate of the Year award, and this award was sponsored by TLC Live Online Tutoring. Chapman is a young pianist who has overcome significant challenges to achieve success in music. Chapman was born blind with complex disabilities, including autism and hearing loss. The Nason Awards, organised by Nason, celebrate outstanding contributions to the education support of children and young people with SEND. These annual awards recognise individual schools and organisations that demonstrate exceptional commitment to inclusive education and the advancement of SEND practices. And Nason is a charitable organisation that supports children and young people with SEND. And Nason's goals include influencing government policy, providing information, training resources to support practitioners, and contributing to the debate and affecting change to improve outcomes for children and young people. You will find links in the show notes to find out more about the work Nason does, their CPD and events. Now, let's get on with the podcast. In this week's show, I am joined by Chapman Shum and Professor Adam Ockelford. Chapman won the Young Advocate of the Year award in the recent Nason Awards. The judges were extremely impressed following Chapman's journey of using his musical talents to challenge stigma and stereotypes of children with SEND, fundraising for good causes, raising awareness for equality among children with SEND, and inspiring those facing difficulties. Chapman makes an impact on the SEND community with his persistence and his encouragement of others to step out of their comfort zone. His outstanding performances have garnered significant attention and media coverage, with him being featured on BBC News 3 times in the past 12 months. Adam Ockelford is a professor of music at the University of Roehampton in London and the founder of the Amber Trust. The Amber Trust is a charity dedicated to supporting blind and partially sighted children on their musical journeys, ensuring that every child, regardless of their needs, can experience the joy and empowerment of music. Hi, Chapman. You are the Nason Young Advocate of the Year 2024, and we met at the Birmingham Awards ceremony. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us what challenges you face and what inspires you to share your journey with the SEND community?
Yeah. Hi everyone, my name is Chapman Shum. I'm from Hong Kong, now studying in the UK. Because of rare disease, I was born blind and having speaking and learning difficulties. But I'm a good pianist. I learn music all by ear. I hope my experience can inspire people who are also facing difficulties. Because if I can do it, you can do it too. Music is a language that brings people together. No matter your ethnicity or ability, let's come together to conquer challenges. Today, I have invited my mentor, Professor Adam, to talk about music and VI children.
Thank you, Chapman.
Thank you.
Well done, Chapman. Oh, Chapman's going now. Right, okay. Right, I'm all yours, Dale.
Hey. Wow. Chapman is amazing.
Yeah, he's a fantastic young man. We've known each other for about 3 years since Chapman and his family came over from Hong Kong. And I think they would say, and I think Chapman would say if he could, that coming to England has been the most wonderful experience for him. He's really blossomed. So within a week, he'd memorized all the London tube stations. So he felt at home in London. He knows when his family drive around, he's like a sat nav. He seems to understand where they are and tells them which road is coming next. So although his language is tricky for Chapman, his memory and his awareness of his surroundings is amazing. And of course, that's before we talk about the music. Yeah.
Because as Chapman said, he was born blind,
Yeah.
and he's got complex disabilities, including autism and hearing loss.
Yeah.
And in the notes he said he began learning the piano at age 6.
Mm-hmm.
And how old is he now?
He's 14, I think. So, yeah, he had a very good teacher in Hong Kong. And I guess the approach in China and Hong Kong is more, you learn pieces and you learn to play them perfectly, and technique is exalted, which is great. It's given him a huge start. I think the way I like to work with children is to certainly support all those things, but also teach them to improvise and to put their own interpretation into what they do. And now Chapman's sort of branching out. He improvises, he plays jazz. And I think that just gives him a greater breadth of possibilities for performing, which is really important, of course, because the number of opportunities for classical pianists is tiny, but the number of people, if you can play by ear the latest number one, if you can go and play a bit of jazz and a bit of folk and a bit of this and that, then suddenly there's lots and lots of options open to you. So, for example, some of my other pupils, they, as well as doing concerts, they also play in homes for people with dementia, for example, play in earlier settings, play in schools, play in shopping centres. And so Chapman's already taking full advantage of community music making, which is really great.
Wow. So Chapman is a member of NOYO, which is the National Open Youth Orchestra.
That's right. Yep. So this is an inclusive music making initiative, which is based actually around the country, and then they come together once a year as a national orchestra. And it's really part of the whole move to music and inclusion, I would say. That's really taken off, I think, in the last 10 to 20 years. I think the work that I've done with colleagues shows that even quite serious, severe levels of disability need be no barrier to making music at a high level. And Chapman really exemplifies that. When you hear him play later, people will be amazed at his virtuosity, about his understanding of music. And so often, if there's one message I always want to get across, it's just don't stereotype. In other words, when I go into a special school with children right across the spectrum of ability, from profound disabilities to high functioning autism, none of those disabilities, those learning difficulties, necessarily have any impact on musical ability. And so very often within a class of children with a whole range of different needs, there might well be, really advanced musical abilities going on, but they're not necessarily recognized. That's the tragedy, I guess.
And I think we make lots of assumptions that because they can't do X, they definitely can't do music and things like that. And I'm a governor of a special school, and at the special school I'm a governor at, there was just left in year 11 a blind pianist.
Mm-hmm.
And again, he got led up on stage, and he needed that support. Sat down at the piano.
Yeah.
He needed no support from that moment on.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that actually what that boy created was phenomenal.
Yeah.
It was amazing to hear. And it just really showed you that, due to his disabilities, he needs support in some situations, but not every situation.
No, and I think in a way it can be a great way of understanding the social model of disability. So I do a lot of work with a guy called Derek Paravicini, who's like Chapman, but he's in his 40s now. I've worked with him for literally 40 years. So
Wow.
My wife, that's what my wife says. Wow, yes. Been married about 40 years as well. Too many people in our marriage, she says. Anyway, no, Derek's great. Anyway, we go all over the world performing and giving lectures, and Derek has the most fantastic life because of his music. Anyway, last year we were invited to the hallowed halls of Harvard University in Boston to give a lecture recital. And I remember saying, so with the room stuffed full of professors and things, and there was Derek. And I just said, I want to explain or try to get you to rethink ability and disability. So I told them when we were coming through the airport how very, very disabled Derek became in a strange environment with lots of sounds he didn't particularly like. He hated having to take off his shoe, all those things that he really hates. And he became a very disabled person because of that environment. And I said to the audience, of course, for you, that would be it's not a problem. You're fully able in that environment. But now let us come to today. And Derek was sitting at the piano. I said, right, I want any of you to pick the most remote, unknown piece you can possibly think of on your phone and come and play it to Derek, and he'll play it back for you. And they did. And then I said, so now who's got the disability and who's got the ability? Because no one else in the room apart from Derek could do that. So in effect, if I asked them to do that task, they'd all be very disabled, wouldn't they? Because they couldn't do it at all, couldn't even begin to do it. And yet Derek did it easy as breathing. Literally, he didn't even think about it. And so I think it just nicely shows how even with quite severe disabilities, the environment can be a huge, huge factor, and people's attitudes can be a huge factor in determining what is ability and what is disability.
So you are the founder of the Amber Trust, which is a charity supporting blind and partially sighted children with music.
Yeah. So in fact, we started Derek's family 30 odd years ago now. They wanted other children who couldn't see or couldn't see very well to have the same opportunities that Derek has had. And so we set up this little charity, and it sort of bumbled along. And then in the last 10 years, it's really taken off. So we support coming up for 800 children across the UK in their pursuit of music. And that can be advanced musicians who are up to the age of 18, who are going on to the conservatoires, who are going on to study music at university, who are going into the profession, equally valued and equally funded as young people who are using music to learn to speak, for example, perhaps like Chapman, whose language is just starting to come now. So music can be a huge, it's both a value in its own right, as a wonderful means of self-expression, as a means of self-fulfillment. But for many of the children we support, it's also a way of scaffolding other learning, particularly language, social skills, and understanding, I would say. So it's a most wonderful charity. We know, because it's small, we know many of the families we support, and they're very supportive of us. And we support children all the way through. So we could support from birth up to the age of 18. So it's lovely to see how the children progress over the years. And it's a great comfort to families to see when they first have the news, perhaps their baby can't see. It's devastating, of course, but then they can see a possible route for their child to be really fulfilled, extremely happy, and have a huge and wide circle of friends, which music brings. And I think that's a really wonderful message for children coming up through the system.
It is. I think, as soon as somebody is visually impaired, certain things are kind of off limits. There are things they won't be able to do, but there are lots of things they can still do, but you probably don't realize it. And music is definitely one of those. Yeah.
When I started out, I was really afraid of falling into the old wives' tale thing, of saying, well, if you're blind, your hearing must be really good. And of course, it's not quite as simple as that. It's complicated for lots of reasons. So for someone like Chapman, physiologically, his hearing isn't that great because he has a syndrome, which means his hearing is affected as well as his vision. But the way his brain processes what he hears is amazing. And it's that added functionality of processing sound that really is affected by blindness, particularly from birth. And really a lot of that auditory development happens in the first 12, 24 months of life. And an exceptional musical ear like Chapman's will already be there by the time he's about 24 months. Time and again, you see blind babies coming up, and by 24 months, they have this thing called absolute pitch. So any note, any sound in the world, they know which key on the piano to press, for example. And it's a huge compensation, really, for not being able to read music. They can hear the notes rather than having to decode them through vision.
Wow. As well as the Amber Trust, you're the creator of the Sounds of Intent framework. So that is something we're adding into B Squared, and we're working with you on that.
Great. I'm really pleased. Thank you.
For our listeners, tell them what Sounds of Intent is.
Sure. So in a nutshell, Sounds of Intent is like a model of how musical abilities and musical interests develop in all of us. Around the year 2000, if you remember that, with the millennium bug and all of that, we went too worried about the millennium bug, but we were worried because no one had actually researched how children with complex needs develop musically. It was a completely research-free zone. And so we sat down with a group of young people, with their teachers, with their parents, and actually we said, let's just start at the beginning. Unlike the national curriculum, which is very top-down, we said, let's go bottom-up. Let's see what the children can do. And if they can do that, can they do this? Is there a developmental process we could chart? And it actually took us 5 years. And you can imagine there were lots of music therapists, speech and language therapists, music teachers, young people. I mean, getting everyone to agree, as you can imagine, was, the old herding cats metaphor. Anyway,
yes,
we did actually. And we identified that there were these distinct stages or phases of musical engagement. And they seem to be universal. Not everyone follows the same route, for sure, in terms of the detail, but they all follow the same underlying journey, if you like. Not everyone gets to the end of the road. Some people, get some way. And the important thing about the Sounds of Intent framework is it's a can-do framework. It says, what can you do? Can you do this? Yes. Can do that? Can you do that? And it's about what I can do, not the deficit model, which so often plagues children like Chapman as well. I think, and it's not really the fault of doctors, because many of the children, their first interaction with public services is through health, of course. And medicine, almost by default, is a deficit model, because it says, well, you can't see, so you won't be able to do this, this, and this. Or you can't understand language, so you won't be able to do this, this, and this. Sounds of Intent takes the opposite view. It's very much the social model, saying, what can you do? And what do teachers need to do to provide the most enabling environment to enable you to progress? And so Sounds of Intent we're very proud of it. It underpins a national music exam system run by Trinity College London. So it means that for the first time anywhere in the world, any young person or child, or indeed adult, whatever their level of musical engagement, can have their abilities recognized, whether they are at the sort of sensory stage of development, whether they're at the what we call the pattern stage, or whether they can produce whole songs or whole pieces of music. But the important thing is it's inclusive. Everyone's there. We're all on the Sounds of Intent framework, and it's been magical to see schools who take it on board, and every child gets a proper nationally regulated music qualification. I was at a little school in Ireland the other day, and they were so proud because all of their children in the special school had got a proper certificate. It's not a tokenistic thing. It's a real thing that is recognised by the UK government. So there's one thing I'm, really think will make a difference over the years. I think it's that public recognition that everyone's musical abilities should be celebrated.
It's amazing when you having an individual who can inspire you, but organisations coming together around inclusion and giving all young children opportunities and that properly recognised qualification or certifications in those areas is phenomenal. And it just, all those sorts of things of raises the profile and makes it more and more accessible to so many more people who probably had no idea that this was available, was an option or anything.
Yeah, and it's funny, Dale, as I sort of get older, you think, when you're young, you think having a good idea is all you need to do in life, and someone will be so pleased to take up your idea. Then you realise that's not the case. And actually, like having in inverted commas, good idea is 1% of this. 99% is persuading other people that it might be a good idea. And funnily enough, it was actually COVID that tipped the balance with Trinity, because basically the awards and certificates in Sounds of Intent that Trinity offer they're based on videos. So the teacher or the parent videos their child in an optimum environment, wherever they feel comfortable doing what they do. And then the teacher or the parent assesses it according to criteria, sends it up to Trinity, who moderate it. So it's very much what you might call an ecologically friendly system. So the child doesn't have to go somewhere strange or meet some peculiar person in a room on their own, which is the traditional exam. It's quite bizarre when you think about it. Anyway. But this was always a hurdle too far because they said, well, safeguarding video and stuff. Then COVID came, and you know what? Within a week, all the exam boards had pivoted onto video material. So suddenly you've got these children in their bedrooms in their pajamas producing music. And suddenly, obviously, they then sort of thought this is probably not appropriate. You know, children need to be an appropriate place to do their exams. But what it did do, it opened the door. Suddenly, it was no barrier. It never was a barrier, but it was a barrier in their minds. And so within months, really, everything became possible. And so what I might call ecological assessment became a reality for the exam boards as well.
So coming back to Chapman.
Yes.
So he's received an Amber Trust Award.
Mm-hmm.
He has been on Blue Peter.
Yes, he's been. Honestly, I can't keep up, Dale. Chapman has the most incredible parents who literally devote their lives to Chapman. And since they've come to England, I think they are more integrated into London life than I am. They just know everything that's happening. They're on every TV program you can imagine, radio, podcasts, you name it. And it's just down to their tenacity, I think, and their belief in their son. It's stunning. And it's people, because they're so outgoing and friendly and warm, and Chapman picks up on that I think people like to be around Chapman, and they feel inspired by him, and he gets the buzz from that. And so it's things like Blue Peter are, have been part of that journey.
And also, so you've been given a list of things he's doing. So he's doing a fundraising concert for Clarity and the Special Olympics at the Queen's Theatre in Barnstable in February. Right. The National Children's Bureau Changing Narratives Theatre performance at Chicken Shed Theatre in February.
Yes.
The Amber Trust annual concert in May. Another one at Riverhouse Barnes Art Theatre in Walton-on-Thames in October. The No-Yo London performance.
Yes.
And Life, which is a London youth folk ensemble.
Oh, yes.
By the Oak in July. So, as you said, his family are ferrying him around everywhere.
Yeah. And
it's amazing.
It is amazing. And one of the most extraordinary things is that even, I work with some very severely autistic people who people think they wouldn't possibly want to do things in front of other people in public. And yet, so many autistic children who find one-to-ones really difficult, put them in front of an audience of 500 people and give them a microphone and they're off. It's like this alter ego takes over. And actually, obviously, one's always very careful for the first time doing a concert, but you just get a sense of when the child has that performing gene, that instinct. And Chapman absolutely loves it. And that's the main thing. He gets a huge buzz. And because he's enjoying himself, and because he's such a good musician, other people in the audience pick up on that. And so it's a reciprocal thing, and he learns such a lot from all the interactions. Derek, the older chap I work with, I mean, he's got severe learning difficulties. He's got an IQ of 58. So, he left school with quite a lot of echolalic kind of speech and certainly no literacy or anything like that. And yet now he can hold his own in a conversation. He can enjoy lots of varied social occasions. And that's all because he's had the opportunities through his music making to meet literally thousands of people, to interact with them in these micro ways you do in public for a few seconds.
Yep.
And it's that has made him the man he is today. And it's the same for Chapman. You can learn so much in a classroom, not a lot sometimes, because whereas a sighted child typically developing would be able to learn an abstract concept and put that into real life, people like Chapman and Derek and the others, they need to experience real things in order to learn. And that's the genius, really, of Chapman's parents. They just get that. And so they give him lots of very carefully scaffolded experiences, but experiences where he can be himself and learn from these micro interactions with other people. So I take my hat off to them. They're not in the room, by the way, I should say.
Yes, Chapman's not in the room, but he will be coming back shortly to perform some music for us. Chapman performed back in October at the Nason Awards ceremony.
Right, yeah.
And it's interesting, as you were saying about that performance thing, there is something about, maybe it is giving them the microphone or sitting down at the piano, which is just, if you kind of put a bubble in it, it's comforting. It's safe. I know what's going to happen. I know the piano's going to make. It's just and almost like you can forget about the wider where you are. And it is really, it's amazing when you sit there. And again, one of the things I think about that whole visual impairment is going back to me being in Harvard and just walking onto that stage and seeing would make you really, oh my gosh, I'm in here. But when you're blind, you're not also having those feelings.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think there is an element of that not seeing 500 people staring at you is probably a good thing. On the other hand, I think people like Derek and Chapman, they're so tuned into sound. They know the size of the occasion. You know, you can tell if it's a big auditorium or a little auditorium. You can tell the kind of tiny noises that people make as they shuffle their programs and stuff. And
you can probably really notice the quietness as soon as you walk on stage.
Yeah.
Are they still talking, or have they just gone really silent? And you can probably tell what type of silence it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can hear a pin drop, you know, when these children perform, because they are amazed. And I like to think that maybe they come out of curiosity to see how can someone who's blind and maybe got a hearing impairment and autistic and got learning difficulties, how can they possibly play complicated music? But then I think after 30 seconds, they've totally forgotten that and get absorbed in the music. I remember it's incredible social change, say in Derek's life of 40 years of public performance, how things have changed. I mean, to put someone like Derek in the public gaze 40 years ago was, people thought they just somehow felt it was inappropriate, you know, because it's like a performing monkey. He can't consent. He doesn't know what he's doing. Who am I? Is it an extension of my Adam's ego to put this little boy in public? And I said, hold on. If he was an ordinary little kid who could see and talk and everything and had that talent, wouldn't you give him the opportunity to perform in public? And of course they said, of course we would. So I said, well, you're just his disability, you're discriminating then, because you're saying because he has a disability, a severe disability, he shouldn't be in public. And that kind of twisted the argument. And now I think because of people like Derek, people like Lucy, who was on the piano, you know, won the piano competition, that made it possible for her. And indeed, in some ways, like the guy who's just won Strictly, you know, now it's normal. It's absolutely something to be celebrated that someone with a severe disability can be a public celebrity. You know, it's not something you have to hide away. People's attitude shouldn't be a barrier. And I think the whole movement has gathered pace, I think, now. And people really love to see people who do have disadvantages doing public things.
I think being seen, being on TV, being around, helps people be aware, and we all learn. That's what's interesting about celebrity with various disabilities people with disabilities who've been on celebrity over the years.
Yeah.
Every year we're learning how they access the world. That yes, in some situations they need support, and then we are watching them doing something that most of us cannot do. Yet they're disabled, with air quotes I'm using. Can't see that or hear that on the podcast, the air quotes with my fingers.
Yeah.
But they are disabled. It's a statement they cannot do and they should not. And as you were saying, and I think, no, we just have to adapt how we listen. And Joanna Grace, who's been on the podcast lots, talks about, for anyone, you just need to tune in to how they're expressing, how they're sharing. You will know whether Derek or Chapman are worried or scared, uncomfortable or anything. By knowing them, you will sense and you will know without them having to say anything. You'll just see body language or things like that, the way they're speaking, and you pick up on it.
Yeah, or the tightening of the hand on your arm. Yeah. Yeah, no, the things that worry Derek are, slightly uneven surface on the stage. That drives him nuts. Or a wire.
But we would not
left trailing wire that he's tripped over. Playing the piano for him is literally as easy as breathing. I remember we were doing a concert in a school up north somewhere. I can't remember where. Yeah, like Leeds or Manchester or somewhere. So anyway, it was a long trek up on the train with Derek from London, and we got to the sort of mid-afternoon of the concert we were doing at a school, a sort of series of workshops really, and we had a singer with us called Hannah, who Derek does a lot of work with. And I suddenly realized that Hannah was singing a song and Derek's accompaniment was getting a bit repetitive. It wasn't kind of moving on as it should. I turned around and he was literally asleep playing. I said, Derek, joked about. But literally for people like Chapman, people like Derek, making music is literally as easy and automatic as breathing. It never occurs to them they can't do it. And that absolute, and it's just like us speaking, it'd be like saying it's as easy for them to play the piano as it is for us to talk. And I think that absolute confidence is the thing that maybe performers with a higher degree of self-awareness would find challenging, because like the more intelligent you are, the more you're aware what can go wrong. And the minute you have, any performer, any athlete knows the minute you doubt, you've lost, haven't you?
Yes.
Whereas people like Derek and Chapman, because they've always played the piano since they were tiny, since they were 24 months, it just never occurs to them they won't be able to do it. It never occurs to them they might forget. Just in 40 years of working with Derek, he's never, ever forgotten what he's playing, or, just doesn't happen.
Wow.
And I think that certainty gives audiences assurance as well. There's nothing worse, is there, being in an audience when you think the performance might go wrong, because the person's nervous. It's terrible, isn't it? Whereas people like Derek and Chapman just exude that absolute confidence, and that makes the audience feel relaxed, I think.
And it also, at the end of that performance, they're probably going, I think you probably are, people in the audience, some people are just going, oh, they're going to play the piano. Others going, oh, is he going to play the piano?
Mm.
The performance is amazing. And then they're left going, oh, I questioned that. Oh,
yeah.
That question stays with them. Why did I think that person couldn't?
Yeah.
Or did I have lower expectations? And I think by being exposed to performances like Chapman, like Derek, is we all have our own thoughts. As you said, the golden one, if you can't see, you must have amazing hearing, that type of things you hear. But you're told things, or you believe things, or the media shape your thoughts. And it's nice to question those thoughts and be surprised.
Totally. And I mean, I always say this, genuinely, it's true that every child I work with, you learn something new, because it's not, people love words like autism as a sort of umbrella term, but the more autistic people the more you realize it's such a broad term. It's almost meaningless these days, really. And the important thing, people always want checklists, don't they? Just give me 10 things, do's and don'ts with autistic children in the music room or the classroom. And I've always refused, because I can guarantee that the first 9 of those would be the wrong things to do with a particular child on a particular occasion. And it's like saying, do you have a checklist for your other kids? I mean, just, no. So don't be ridiculous, almost. The experiment I've always wanted to do, and one day I will do it. I want to, it's one of these psychological tests. So you have a picture of a child in a wheelchair, picture of a child with a nice, going to a nice public school somewhere with his cap on and his tie, and then underneath you've got 2 pictures. You've got a violin and you've got a toy drum. And I say, right, pick the instrument for the child. And I guarantee 95% of people would say, yeah, wheelchair, must need toy drum. Child in, smart uniform, able to run around, must need violin. And yet, there's absolutely no reason to make that assumption. And I think we should run some sort of advert campaign about that, because to me, that's the ultimate. They talk about unconscious bias, don't they, and stereotype.
Oh, yeah.
But that certainly still exists a lot. And I guess what Chapman does is he blows away that myth. And every time he or Lucy or Derek or the others appear in public, a little bit more of that myth gets chipped away. So that's the important thing.
And we need to chip it away.
Yeah.
Right. Shall we bring back
the
Chapman?
young man? Yeah. Chapman. Okay, there's Chapman.
Right, okay.
Not too much pedal.
Not too much paddle, Chapman.
Tell Del, what are you going to play?
I'm going to play 20 Blues number 2 by the second movement of Three Impressions by Joseph Merkel.
Right, there we go. I shall move out your way, Dave.
Thank you, Chapman.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dale.
You will find links in our show notes to find out more about Chapman's journey and the Amber Trust. And you'll find the show notes, as always, wherever you listen to the podcast or on our website. So thank you for listening to the show. If you want to get in touch, let us know your thoughts, suggest topics or anything else, please message us on social media or send an email to hello@thesencast.com. The Nason Awards are organised by Nason, and they celebrate outstanding contributions to the education support of children and young people with SEND. These annual awards recognise individuals, schools and organisations that demonstrate exceptional commitment to inclusive education and the advancement of SEND practices. And Nason is a charitable organisation that supports children and young people with SEND, and Nason's goals include influencing government policy, providing information, training and resources to support practitioners, and contributing to debate and affecting change to improve outcomes for children and young people. You'll find links in the show notes so you can find out more about the work Nason does, their CPD and events. Thank you for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of the SENDcast.